Alright, so this video has been requested a couple times and I figured I'd finally put it together for y'all. It's going to be techniques of haggling. Now these are just sort of trends that I've noticed through all my motorcycle purchases. I've purchased, I don't know, over 100 motorcycles in my life, and they've all been secondhand, they've all been old bikes, they've all been bikes that I've purchased from private sellers. And these are just sort of, a couple of patterns and a couple of trends that I've picked up on that I use in my future acquisitions that I'll share with you guys. A couple things. First off, I'm really only talking about my own culture here, which is the United States. My fans in the UK and Russia and South Africa, I can't talk for you guys because I've never purchased a bike over there. So I don't really know how the haggling process works over there. Still might be interesting food for thought, but don't take this as gospel or anything. Additionally, different people haggle in different ways. For you guys who have purchased used bikes before, I'm sure that you guys have picked up on your own methods that you prefer. And I'm not here to tell you what to do and how to do it. This is just how I do it. Why am I doing this? For a couple reasons. First off, for those of you who are out there selling your bikes, it can maybe make you a little bit more aware about what might be going on in the minds of some of your buyers. For those of you who are out there purchasing bikes, it might help you, I don't want to say give an advantage, but it might, help prepare you for the haggling process if you've never done it before, or giving you, some ideas of what to do and what to expect. Alright, so in the United States at least, haggling over a used motorcycle is pretty much expected. I don't think I've ever paid full price for a bike, or full asking price, and I don't think anybody has ever paid full asking price for one of mine. Some people get really uncomfortable when they think about haggling, and they get just real nervous and they don't really like the process. They feel like they're being shysty, or they feel like they're insulting the buyer, or anything. I've never been shy to haggle. I will go back and forth with somebody, and if it seems like it's not going anywhere, then we'll just have to come to an agreement. Either we're going to make the deal or we're not. Really, unless the ad says firm price, I want this amount firm, then I go in there with, with the idea that I can probably haggle the guy down between, I don't know, between 10 and 50%. I know that's kind of a large range, but I always go in there ambitious to haggle. And one of the ways that I can achieve a good haggle, one of the ways that I can lower the price of this motorcycle is to sort of connect with the seller on sort of a personal level, and that requires sort of fleshing out who he or she is, what they're all about, why they're selling their bike, their relationship to their bike, etc. So yeah, that is definitely required in order to haggle with somebody and get their price down. That's why whenever somebody comes to buy a bike of mine, and they come at it like, the very first thing they say, either over email or on the phone or in person is, what's bottom dollar? What's best price? Bottom dollar, best price. That is absolutely the worst thing you can do when you're trying to haggle. That is the biggest rookie mistake. And once I explain my theory behind people's relationships with bikes and money and the haggling process, then you might understand why. But if you take one thing from this video, it is that just coming at it, bottom dollar, what's bottom dollar? That is absolutely the worst thing to do. If I was about to sell my grandmother into whorehouse slavery for money, and I had a bike to sell, and somebody came up saying, bottom dollar, what's your bottom dollar? I wouldn't sell it. It's just, it totally, absolutely rubs me the wrong way. So, just going to throw that out there. Alright, one final note before we go into the theory behind haggling is that when you're buying a used motorcycle, it's kind of different from like haggling with a used car salesman, or buying something else used over Craigslist or whatever. Because people tend to forge these emotional connections with motorcycles. And when a person is selling their motorcycle, and it was their personal motorcycle, not one of the bikes, that I've got out there, but it's like their personal bike, there's a lot of things that could potentially be going on with them at that very moment. You know, they could be very frustrated that they were unable to get it running, or they crashed it, and they spent all this money on it. You know, and they're very frustrated at their stupidity, or they had some really awesome times with this bike. They had this great history with this bike, but they just had a baby. And they had to make this life decision. And they're feeling middle-aged or whatever. It's like all kinds of things could be going on in the seller's mind when they're selling their bike. Sometimes it's just like, whatever, it's a piece of machinery, I'm just getting rid of it, but the vast majority of times it's somebody's personal motorcycle that they have an emotional connection to. So the very first thing that I look for when I go and meet the seller is I try and determine how he or she feels about this bike. I look at the way that he talks about the bike, about his history about the bike, how he walks around the bike. If he's just like, oh, this is the tank, or whatever, then that tells me something. If he actually like places his hand on the tank and he makes sure not to let his wedding ring dent the tank or ding it. If he's really careful with it, that tells me something else. Everyone's got an emotional connection with their bikes, and so that's another reason why you just don't go like, bottom dollar. I'm gonna stop talking about that. That just rubs me the wrong way on so many levels. But it's just important to understand that, like, this is somebody's emotions that you're dealing with here, right? So yeah, you want to get the best price, but you also have to consider at what cost. You just don't want to go in there and try and rape somebody, and you don't want to go in there and lie to somebody, or try and deceive them. The two of you want to settle on a price, and that should be your goal. You don't want to go and scam anybody, because moreover than the amount of money that's being exchanged is this is somebody's emotions here. This is this decision will likely affect how they feel about themselves, at least in the near future, perhaps for a long time. So especially in situations when it's a crashed bike, or a bike that the person just couldn't figure out how to fix, or something like that, you really want to consider who you're dealing with, and how they are going to feel when you leave the transaction. Alright, so you all know I love my visual aids, and so we're going to get into the theory that I have behind haggling here. Here we have just a graph, and it's dollar signs, 100, 200, 300. Let's say you're going out and you're going to go look at like a 25-year-old bike that's not running, right? And the owner is asking, say, $500 for it. Okay. There are a couple of different notations on this scale that that you should be aware of, and that is worth considering. First off, let's say he's asking $500 for it, okay? And he has likely got a number in his mind of how much the bike cost him to initially purchase, how much money he's had to invest in it, how much time, whatever. He's got some dollar amount of what he's got into it, right? So let's say he bought it for $200 and he spent $100 on it, right? So this is sort of like his baseline. This is baseline. And he's probably not going to want to go below that. Now, he might disclose this to you. He might be like, yeah, I've got $300 into it, so I want $300 out of it, But if you don't hear that, it's quite possible that he's asking $500, and then this here is his profit margin, $200, okay? So this is where you guys start, right? He is in no way going to get more than $500. If he says, initially I want $500, there's no way that this is going to go up, right? So basically what you guys are doing are haggling back and forth between this $500 and $300 range, right? If you come at this bike and you're saying, oh, I'll give you $100 for it, he's going to tell you to go screw himself, right? To go screw yourself. But if you start at it and you're like, well, okay, kick the tires a little bit, and say like, okay, I got, $350, I'll give you $350 for it, and he thinks to himself, well, $50, that's not very much profit for all that headache. I'm gonna bump him up to $450, and you guys just sort of go back and forth between here until you, let's say you reach, 420. Perfect number. My favorite number. 420. Alright, sold. That's a typical haggling experience, right? And that is, that's a really healthy haggling. You know, you got a little bit of a discount, he's still got some money in his pocket, you know, he's still got some profit, and that's okay, you know. Sometimes you'll find that you are haggling below the baseline. And this is this happens when, let's say, this guy bought this bike for $300, and then something happened either to him or to the bike. Let's say he got hit with some credit card bills, or he got a DUI or something. You know, let's say the bike was running and now it's not, and it received some damage. You know, and so you guys can be haggling between like here and here. And all the while, he's looking sort of down and depressed or whatever, because he knows that he's already losing money on this, you know, and so he feels, I don't know, he feels kind of bummed out about it, right? This is one of those situations where, you know, you really should, you should pick up on the fact that, all right, he's losing money, you know, he feels like an idiot, you know, maybe he messed up his bike or whatever. You should pick up on that, but also this is situation where you should tread rather lightly, because if he feels like you're dickering too far below the baseline, and you're just sort of going back and forth here, then he can just cut it off. He can be like, all right, no, forget it, you know, I'll part it out, I'll put it on eBay, you know, I'll get some other buyer, forget it. So these ones down here are usually, you know, a little bit dicier and a little bit more difficult. Now, what would cause somebody to drop below their baseline? Like I said, the bike is damaged, or it's not running so great anymore. He's maybe got some personal problems, you know, he's, I don't know, you know, working on some bills or whatever. That would cause it, you know, to drop below. Also, if you come and let's say you're like a really shrewd haggler, right? You come and he's asking the absolute baseline. He says, I want 300. 300 is what I got into it, you know. And you come and you kick the tires and you tell him how the bike's a piece of shit, da-da-da-da-da. You can lower the price below the baseline. If that's what you're aiming for, then, I mean, by all means, just go ahead and be a shrewd haggler, you know. You know, and that's your decision, you know. He can raise the price above the baseline. He can, I mean, like I said, he can present his bike in a really good light. He can just sort of, you know, tell you about all the history that he has with the bike. You know, you can talk about the potential of the bike, you know, everything. Oh, I've got a buddy who says this bike can do 150 miles an hour type of thing, you know, da-da-da. He can build up the bike, even though it's no more valuable than the original 300, he can build it up a little bit. So those are tactics that, you know, buyers should watch out for in sellers. Now, it's not just the sellers that can raise the price. Sometimes the buyers can raise the price inadvertently as well. If you come at this bike and you say, oh, it's my very first bike, you know, you paint yourself as sort of an ignorant person who's willing to pay a little bit more than the bike is worth. Typically, you know, also, like, let's say you ride up and you know, you're pulling a trailer behind your Escalade, you know, someone might be like, oh, okay, that guy's got some money. I'm going to start, you know, my asking price a little bit higher, you know, up here. You need to be aware of how you come off and how you present yourself, you know. That's why it's always a good idea to do a little bit of research, you know, so you can ask intelligent questions. You know, you can say like, oh, does this GSXR have those, you know, typical second gear problems, you know, any slipping in the second gear, you know, something like that. And that sort of lets this buyer know that you're not somebody who's going to have the wool pulled over their eyes as easily. Sometimes sellers can, sometimes sellers can inadvertently lower their price. If they, like, let's say they're the type of person who leaves the bike out, you know, in the rain all the time, and you go and it's some punk kid with his bike and he leaves it out in the rain, you know. That way, you know, that way as a buyer, you know that A, this kid probably doesn't have as great a bike as he thinks he does, so we can haggle on that. And B, he probably doesn't put too much personal value in this motorcycle, because the more personal value a person has in the bike, the more they like the bike, the higher the price is generally going to be, regardless of how much the bike is worth. I know for my personally, I wouldn't sell my bike for $50,000. All right, you can have it for $60,000. That's what I would sell my bike for. It is worth 2,000 tops on a good day. So that's just because I love my bike. There's a whole lot of personal connection that I have to my motorcycle. I'm not alone in that. Lots of people feel the same way. So if, let's say that you're trying to sell your bike, you should look at how you're presenting yourself and your bike and the relationship between the two. If you appear like you don't give a shit about the bike, then people are gonna, haggle you down probably below your baseline, and that's the best you're gonna get for your bike. So, be aware of how you present yourself and, how people can pick up on your personal relationship with your bike. Alright, so we're coming to the end here. Basically, all of these lines and all of these notes are just sort of ways that I have observed the final price of a motorcycle sale changes based on how a person relates to their bike, their history of it, and what kind of person they are. If they're a very seasoned rider, if they're a new rider, some punk kid or whatever. That's how that can affect all of this. And so when somebody comes at me and they say bottom dollar, they just want to take this bottom dollar. They don't care about learning who I am or what my bike is or what our relationship is or anything. They just want to cut through all that bottom dollar, and that's just counteractive to the haggling process. The haggling process is figuring all this stuff out. It's figuring out who this person is, how much they have in the bike, how much they're willing to let go for it, how you can relate to them on a personal level to maybe get them to knock a couple $100s off. If you come at it, and you say like, hey man, I used to have one of these bikes when I was a kid, I really liked them, my friend had one, people will generally warm up to you and they'll be like, okay, yeah, I'll knock a couple $100 off or whatever. But if you just want to cut through all that, you don't care about who I am, and you just want to go bottom dollar, then it's just gonna negate the entire process. And so that's why it never works on me. I've let people talk me down below baseline. If they were cool enough people, if I liked them, if we had shared a similar history, we shared a past, I've let people talk me. I've taken a hit on motorcycle parts and bikes and stuff like that just because I enjoyed their company so much, And I'm sure I've done it the same. I can be a charming person. But, so this is just, something to think about. I'm not here trying to teach people how to take advantage of other people. If you want to lie and say, yeah, I used to have one of these bikes when I was a kid, well, that's your business. If you want to misrepresent yourself and try and trick some kid into selling his bike, to you and for a lower price than it's worth, then fine, whatever, I try and give people a reasonably fair price, at least a reasonably fair market price for their bike, especially because I'm making a profit on their motorcycles and their motorcycle parts. So I try and give them a good experience, and at least leave them with enough money that they can go out and put it towards another motorcycle if they felt so inclined. Some guys have come over and tried to get me to sell them, one of my bikes for a ridiculous price, and it's just not going to happen. And you don't win them all. Sometimes a reasonable price to you is not reasonable to another person, and you guys go away, and hopefully you go away amicably, and if not as friends, then at least, not as enemies, and you go on to haggle another day. So, yeah, I know this was a long, rambling one. Hopefully there's some nuggets of information in here that you guys can pull out and use next time you have a business transaction with your motorcycles. So yeah, that's it. Y'all have a good one.